Hello and welcome to Demonic History, the series in which we discuss everything and anything related to the malevolent inhuman spirits known as demons. In the last video, we discussed demonology from Christian and other Abrahamic perspectives, focusing mostly on the Bible and other biblical scripture. Today will be much different. Yes, as you can see from the title, today we will be diving into demonology from the occult perspective. If, however, you haven't seen the Christian Demonology Guide, I highly recommend checking that one out first and then returning here, as in it we go over the history of demonic spirits, their origins, their purpose, and their abilities as far as the Abrahamic faiths are concerned, and we won't be going over any of that again in much detail here. Most of occult demonology is very much connected to Abrahamic demonology, so it's best you first understand that before diving into the madness we have in store today. This is, in a way, part 2 of my demonology overview. And I must stress the fact that this will be an overview and by no means a complete and full account of every single element within occult demonology. You must understand that occult demonology is the culmination of thousands of years of study and many different grimoires and texts and hundreds of demons and differing opinions and rituals and witchcraft and all sorts of things that we simply couldn't cover in a single video. That being said, I want to provide here a basic overview of the central aspects of occult demonology as sort of a jumping point for future videos. But as you watch, know that nearly everything I mention here, every demon, every grimoire, every story, every concept, will potentially get its own dedicated video in the future, where we can dive into more detail. Anyways, get comfortable, and let's get started. Before we discuss the intricacies of occult demonology, let's briefly establish, or re-establish for those who have seen part 1, what exactly a demon is as far as the Christian belief goes. To put it simply, demons are evil, inhuman spirits, at least according to our current definition. As we discussed in the first video, the term demon is derived from the Greek word daimon, which originally was a word referring to a wide variety of supernatural entities. Greek and Roman philosophers such as Plato and Apuleius wrote that they are messengers between humans and gods, and attributed many different things to the works of daimons. Things such as thunder and lightning, the flights of birds, and the foresight of prophets. Anything they couldn't fully explain. It's also important to note that as far as the Greeks and Romans were concerned, and even more ancient societies such as ancient Mesopotamia, demons carried no immediate negative connotations as they do today. They were morally ambiguous, some good and some bad. It wasn't until much later when Greek translators of the Hebrew Bible, or the Septuagint, began using the term to refer to the pagan gods and evil spirits found in the Bible that the word started to become solely associated with evil entities, and it wasn't until centuries after that that the Judeo-Christian concept of demons being evil spirits fully took over. In the Bible, they are also referred to as unclean spirits, or devils. And as we already discussed in great depth in the previous video, the mainstream Christian belief is that demons are fallen angels. Angels that were cast out of heaven for committing sin. However, this is only an interpretation of the scripture, and not something that is ever outright stated within the Bible. There is another belief within Abrahamic scripture that demons are not fallen angels, but rather the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, a race of giants that once roamed the earth as a result of a group of angels known as the Watchers impregnating human women. An event referenced in the book of Genesis and farther expanded on in the apocryphal scriptures, the book of Enoch, the book of Giants, and the book of Jubilees. If you're interested in hearing more on these origins and other ones, like I said, we discuss it all in depth in the Christian Demonology Guide. I think, however, as far as this video is concerned, all you need to know is that demons are, for the most part, evil spirits. Generally speaking, the Abrahamic belief is that God allows these evil spirits and their leader Satan to tempt and torment mankind in an effort to test our faith, to bring us closer to God, and to glorify the works of God in contrast to the works of Satan. King James I describes them as a rod of correction. It's important to remember, however, that while a lot of mainstream media portrays Satan and his demons as an equivalent evil force to God and his angels, as far as the Abrahamic faiths are concerned, that simply isn't the case. God is all-powerful, and demons are only able to operate within his limitations, and only until the day of judgment, when they will be cast into fire. As far as biblical knowledge goes, demons are capable of possessing living creatures, and through this demonic possession, they can drive people insane, control them, afflict them with physical illnesses and ailments such as deformities, blindness, and muteness. They cause misery and lead mankind away from the path of God through temptation. Again, more on this in the Christian Demonology Guide with references to specific Bible verses and whatnot, but I felt the need to at least summarize it here before moving on. Lastly, I'd like to reiterate that within the Bible, demons have no physical description. That is because these beings, as far as the Christian belief goes, are formless and entirely spiritual. They can interact with the physical realm, but never do they take a physical form in it, besides through demonic possession. That is, of course, besides Satan, who takes many forms within the Bible, but as we discussed last time, it's highly debatable whether or not Satan is actually a demon, and his ability to take form and even visit heaven on occasion may actually be proof that he is in fact a different type of entity. Anyways, that is basically the brief recap of things we discussed in the last video as far as what demons are within the Christian faith. And I really wanted to bring that up again here so that you can see just how much the occult has expanded upon and altered those ideas. Yes, from military rankings, physical descriptions, types of demons, rituals to summon them, and their own individual names, sigils, fields of knowledge, and personalities, occult science, as they call it, has developed demonology far beyond the information found in biblical scripture, and we'll be going over much of it today. First, let's talk about the occult itself, and what exactly that even means, just so we're all on the same page. Occultism, at least these days, refers to a variety of supernatural or spiritual beliefs, even outside of demonology, although that is one of the most common associations with the word. Generally speaking, any practice or belief that falls outside of proven science or organized religion can be referred to as the occult. Most commonly, it is associated with mysticism and magic. In 16th century Europe, the term occult was used to refer to things such as astrology and alchemy, as well as those who practiced magic. It comes from the Latin word occultus, meaning hidden or secret, and essentially means knowledge of the hidden, or its more modern definition, knowledge of the paranormal, in contrast to knowledge of the measurable, which we call science. The actual people who study or practice occult science are known as occultists, which sort of changes the term the occult to sound more like a group, where if you are an occultist, it means you are a member of the occult. Not exactly its original use, but one that a lot of mainstream movies and media uses. You could, for example, say that I am an occultist for my study of demonology and other supernatural things on this channel. You could also say that because you are watching these videos that you too are now also occultists, so welcome to the occult, my brothers and sisters. It's also important to understand that being an occultist doesn't mean you cannot also be a part of an organized faith, and it doesn't mean that you are a demon worshipper or anything like that, as any priests and exorcists who study demonology can also be referred to as occultists. There is a belief within Christianity that it is important to learn about Satan and his demons because knowledge is power. You cannot fight or defend against an enemy you know nothing about. Know thy enemy and know thyself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles. General Sun Tzu. Anyways, I thought it made sense to explain that briefly so that when I say the occult throughout the rest of the video, you know I'm not speaking of some specific small group of people or some cult. I'm speaking of paranormal beliefs as a whole, or the people who study them. So as I mentioned, over the course of the last couple thousand years or so, the field of occult study known as demonology has grown immensely. When people watch all those demonic possession horror movies and hear the names of the demons and stuff like that, they tend to think, oh, they must be mentioned in the Bible somewhere, but that really isn't necessarily the case. Outside of Satan, there are very few demon names mentioned in the Bible, if any at all. And most of them are either not originally demons, but rather the names of pagan gods, or things not intended to be names at all, but rather words taken out of context. Take my name, for example. Belial is the first demon mentioned in the Bible, according to the occult. In the Old Testament, the word appears 27 times, usually in reference to the sons of Belial. But you see, Belial is a Hebrew word that means wickedness, worthlessness, or lawlessness. And so when the Bible speaks of the sons of Belial, it is speaking of criminals and sinful people, those who are deemed worthless, not sons or followers of a demon named Belial. However, information in the Dead Sea Scrolls may beg to differ, but more on that another time. There is another popular occult demon in the Bible by the name of Mammon. But again, this isn't actually a name, but rather a word referring to greed, money, and material wealth. Abaddon, another so-called biblical demon, refers to a place of destruction or a realm of the dead, similar to Sheol or Hell. The only demon in the Bible I can think of outside of Satan that isn't just a recontextualized word or pagan god is Asmodeus, described as the worst of the demons in the Book of Tobit. But even then, the Book of Tobit isn't considered canonical scripture by many denominations, usually only appearing in the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Bibles. My point is, there is a very small amount of information on demons in the Bible. They are usually only mentioned in passing, and the verses tend to focus much more on Jesus or the other characters involved rather than the demons themselves. So, if the Bible doesn't really provide much information on demons, where on earth did the occult get all this extra information? Did they pull it out of thin air? Not exactly. Allow me to introduce you to who I would refer to as the father of occult demonology, King Solomon of ancient Israel. King Solomon was the son and successor of King David of Israel. His reign is thought to have occurred from 970 to 931 BC, and details of his life are described throughout the Bible's Old Testament, most notably 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and 2 Chronicles. However, he is also mentioned in the New Testament as well, making him quite a notable figure throughout all the Abrahamic faiths. In Christianity, he is seen as a wise teacher and even compared to Jesus in a couple verses. In Judaism, he is one of the 48 Jewish prophets, described as being wealthy, powerful, and wise, and he is also considered to be a major Islamic prophet in the Quran. In fact, in Jewish tradition, King Solomon is believed to have actually written 3 of the books in the Bible: the Book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, also known as the Song of Solomon. His most notable achievement in the Bible is in 1 Kings chapters 5 to 7, where it describes King Solomon building the first temple in Israel, which took 7 years to construct. King Solomon is one of the most wealthy and successful rulers in all of history, at least according to the information in the Bible. Throughout his reign, he greatly expanded his kingdom's wealth and military might, founding many colonies and trading outposts. It is said that during his reign, the kingdom of Israel was at the height of its wealth, and that King Solomon surrounded himself in luxury and grandeur. It is worth noting, however, that the truth of Solomon's wealth and the size of his empire is a topic of much debate, and there is very little proven historical and archaeological evidence that point towards the biblical depiction of him being accurate, with some experts believing it to be greatly exaggerated and implausible for the time. But in the Bible, Solomon was a very wealthy king, with a very large kingdom. If, however, there was one thing said to have been greater than Solomon's wealth, it was his wisdom. Wisdom so great it's said to have been gifted to him by God himself. In 1 Kings chapter 3 verses 4 to 15, it tells of King Solomon offering 1,000 burning offerings at an altar in the ancient city of Gibeon. Later that night, God appears before Solomon in a dream and says, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." So Solomon asks God for a discerning heart to govern his people and distinguish between right and wrong. The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this, so God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life, or wealth for yourself, nor for the death of your enemies, but discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life." So essentially, upon his humble request, God granted Solomon great wisdom to rule over the people of Israel, and on top of that, granted him wealth and honor because he did not ask for it. In fact, according to these verses, God made Solomon so wise that the world would never see anyone as wise as him, and so wealthy and powerful that there would be no king in his lifetime that could compare. This is obviously quite the insane gift for God to grant someone. As it said, so long as Solomon was faithful to God, he would live a long and prosperous life. And so he was faithful to God his whole life and lived happily ever after. Just kidding. You see, our good pal Solomon here got up to some pretty questionable things. First of all, according to the Bible, he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Yes, you heard me correctly. 1,000 women. Most of which were foreign princesses from other lands, including the pharaoh's daughter, whom he married in order to secure a political alliance with Egypt. Curiously enough, the only wife out of all 700 mentioned by name is a woman by the name of Naamah, who is the mother of Solomon's son and successor Rehoboam. Which is a weird coincidence if you watched my first demonology video in which I spoke of Naamah, the mother of demons who seduced the Watchers Semyaza and Azazel. It's not the same Naamah, as far as we know. Anyways, in 1 Kings chapter 11, it states that his wives were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. It says that he followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. This fall from grace will be elaborated on shortly, but interesting little side note. As I explained in the previous video, pagan gods such as the ones Solomon's wives turned him towards were later seen by the Christian faith as demons. In fact, in the Hebrew Bible, the words for idols and foreign deities were translated by the Greek as daimon. So the Ammonite god Molech, or Moloch, is actually depicted as a bull or minotaur-like creature, as are some other ancient pagan gods, which possibly had some influence on our current depiction of demons with horns. That, along with the description of Satan in Revelation. The goddess Ashtoreth, also known as Astarte, along with her male counterpart Baal, were believed by ancient Christians to be great enemies of God, and therefore in later occult texts they are associated with the demons Astaroth and Baal. So already in the Bible we have connections being made between King Solomon and demons. It also says that he built monuments to all of these pagan gods worshipped by his many wives so that they could make offerings and sacrifice to them, specifically mentioning a monument for Molech and one for the Moab god Chemosh. But the worshipping of pagan gods, who may or may not have been demons. While it is likely connected to the legends and possibly even the source of them, it's not exactly why Solomon is seen as a very important figure within occult demonology. No, the reason we are talking about Solomon in the first place is because of a text called the Testament of Solomon. It is considered the oldest work concerning individual demons, and essentially the jumping point for every piece of occult demonology literature that followed. You see, although it is mostly denied by Abrahamic religions, legend has it that King Solomon was one of the greatest exorcists and practitioners of magic and demonic sorcery to ever live. In fact, when people speak of magic to summon demons, they are usually speaking of what the occult refers to as Solomonic magic, borrowing its name from King Solomon. The Testament of Solomon, which claims to be a first-hand account written by Solomon himself, describes a story in which a young boy, the son of the chief deviser working on the temple in Jerusalem, is being tormented by a demon named Orneus. Solomon, favoring the boy, goes to the temple and prays for authority over the demon so that he might save the boy, and his prayers are answered. The archangel Michael, yes, the same Michael who vanquishes Satan in Revelation, gives King Solomon a magic ring engraved with the seal of God, which, believe it or not, turns out to be a pentagram, although sometimes depicted as a hexagram similar to the Star of David. In case you were wondering why the pentagram is such a popular symbol among the occult, witches, and demonic imagery, this is partly why, although its use definitely goes back much farther. Today, the inverted pentagram is usually representative of something demonic, like Satan or the demon idol Baphomet. Anyways, the story goes that the ring gave Solomon the power to command demons. He then gives the ring to the child and tells him to throw it at the demon when he next comes to take life from the boy. And so he does, throwing the ring at the demon's chest and stamping him with the seal of God, effectively bringing the demon under Solomon's control. But he doesn't stop there. Solomon questions the demon about his nature, and Orneus reveals many things about himself. Things like how he metamorphoses into a beautiful woman to attract men and take hold of them in their sleep, and how he transforms into a lion that is commanded by other demons. As you can probably gather, although it likely plays on even older concepts from Satan in the Bible and other Abrahamic traditions and folklore, much of the expanded abilities of demons within occult demonology, such as the act of seducing men as a succubus or transforming into a variety of different animals, comes from the Testament of Solomon and his questioning of the demons. Anyways, Solomon then takes his newfound power a step farther and commands the demon Orneus to take the ring and seal the prince of demons, Beelzebul, more commonly known as Beelzebub. This is a bit confusing because, as you'll find out later in this video, Beelzebub in many occult grimoires is listed as a separate demon from Satan or Lucifer, but in the Testament of Solomon he is the prince of demons, and he claims to be a former heavenly angel associated with the planet Venus, the evening star or the morning star, which is Lucifer. So in the case of the Testament of Solomon, Solomon actually seals Lucifer himself, which gives him command over all demons. The text goes on telling of a number of different demons that Solomon summoned and questioned, and essentially it reads as almost a series of interviews, with each demon revealing much of the information that future occult writers would draw inspiration from. It's also worth noting that after he questions each demon, he puts them to work on building the temple, meaning that, according to the Testament of Solomon, the first temple in Israel, mentioned in the Bible as one of Solomon's greatest feats, was actually built with the help of the many demons under his control. I will go over the full Testament of Solomon in its own dedicated video, but for now, allow me to list some of the more interesting information it teaches us about demons. Firstly, Beelzebul tells Solomon that it is he who makes manifest the apparition of each demon. Some interpret this to actually mean that it is Beelzebul or Satan that actually creates the demons, which throws pretty much all of our previous demon origin stories out the window. However, it could also just mean that Beelzebul is in control of all the demons and can bring any demon before him or make them appear on command. This interpretation makes more sense because when the demons talk about their birth, it often contradicts the first interpretation. Anyways, Solomon asks Beelzebul if there are females among them, to which he confirms that there are female demons. He then brings before Solomon a female demon by the name of Oniskelis. Note that some occultists believe demons to have no gender at all, but rather to just transform into the gender that they need to be to accomplish a seduction or other task. The Testament of Solomon, however, clearly states when a demon is a female or male. It does mention them transforming into the opposite sex, but it implies that they have a base original gender when not transformed. The confirmation of female demons existing, though, is actually interesting because in the Christian belief, if demons are fallen angels, then there should be no females among them, as all angels are male, or at least appear in masculine form. If, however, demons are the spirits of the Nephilim giants, there would be females, so 1 point Nephilim, 0 points fallen angels. As a matter of fact, one of the demons questioned by Solomon straight up says that he is the spirit of a giant man who died in the massacre in the time of the giants, which is the clearest confirmation of the Nephilim origin in the Testament. It does, however, like I said, say that Beelzebul is a former heavenly angel, which again brings me back to my point from the Christian demonology video that Satan is a fallen angel, but his demons are not. In fact, later in the Testament of Solomon, Beelzebul states that he alone is left of the angels of heaven that came down. So of all the angels that fell from heaven, he is the only one that is still around. We can assume the rest, as the Bible states, are locked away in chains of darkness. So almost all the evidence within biblical scripture and the Testament of Solomon points to Satan being a fallen angel, but his demons being a different type of entity. Anyways, there is one other particularly interesting thing that we learned from the demon Oniskelis that I have sort of a hard time talking about without laughing. When asked about her birth, she says that she was born of a voice untimely, the so-called echo of a man's ordure dropped in a wood. Translation, she was born from some dude taking a shit in the woods. I don't know if it's metaphorical or something, but I'm just saying that must have been one hell of a shit, dude. The man birthed a demon. Anyways, as hilarious as that is, it does present an interesting concept. The possibility that demons can be born from many things, and that maybe one specific origin for all demons is not exactly how it works. The birth of Oniskelis would prove that there is more than one way a demon can be brought into existence. The next demon brought before Solomon is the infamous Asmodeus, who tells him that he was born of an angel's seed by a daughter of man, which is again more in line with the fall of the Watchers and the spirits of the Nephilim origin. It also aligns with the Jewish story of Lilith and Samael, in which the demon prince Asmodeus is a child of Lilith. He also says that his business is to plot against the newly wedded so that they may not know each other, saying that he, quote, wastes away the beauty of virgin women and estranges their hearts. He then goes on to say that he drives men into fits of madness and desire to go off by night and day to others that belong to other men, with the result that they commit sin and fall into murderous deeds. So essentially, as we learn throughout the Testament of Solomon, every demon sort of has their own focus and their own unique way of leading mankind astray and causing suffering. Asmodeus likes to drive wedges between newly married couples, causing the man to lose interest in his wife and to cheat on her with the wives of other men, possibly leading to violence. This is likely derived from his actions in the Book of Tobit, in which he continuously murders the would-be grooms of a woman named Sarah. Asmodeus tells Solomon that his kingdom after some time is to be disrupted, suggesting that demons are capable of having some sort of foresight. Another demon in the Testament actually foretells of the Son of God being stretched upon the cross, in reference to the crucifixion of Jesus. It's also worth noting that every demon Solomon interviews mentions some sort of star or planetary body that they are connected to in some way. So yeah, all demons are astrology girls, apparently. He also asks every demon which angel frustrates them the most, to which they all name different angels that they strongly oppose, giving birth to a concept within some occult literature in which every demon sort of has a rival angel with virtues opposite to their own. In some cases, these angels can be called upon or invoked to protect oneself from a particular demon, or to gain control over it. Anyways, I think it's best that we save the remainder of Solomon's demonic interviews for another video because we do have to move on. But some things to note. The demons within the Testament of Solomon all have names, specific expertise, activities, and abilities, some sort of celestial body or star that they are connected to, an angel that they hate, and physical appearances, most of which are things that the Bible never mentions. It also mentions a few times the concept of a demon having legions of other demons under their command, which is something you'll see in a lot of occult literature. Note also that there is much variety in these demons and the things they are capable of. One demon he speaks to by the name of Tefris causes wind and dust to kick up upon his arrival. He says he brings darkness on men and sets fire to fields. He is essentially a natural disaster. Another interview speaks of 7 female spirits bound and woven together who all speak with one voice. Another simply appears as a headless man. Some of them appear as different animals, one of them a 3-headed dragon with human hands, and another could take the form of a wave at sea. Unlike the common Christian belief in which demons take no physical form, the occult belief is generally that demons, just like the devil himself, take on any form that suits their current task. My point being that the demons in occult demonology are much more complicated and surreal compared to the way they are described in biblical scripture. In the Testament of Solomon, it elaborates on what the Bible said about Solomon's wives turning his heart after other gods. It tells of a Shunammite woman with whom King Solomon fell in love. Solomon at first refused to make sacrifices to strange gods, until this woman gave him grasshoppers and told him to crush them in the name of her god Moloch. Only then would she sleep with Solomon. And Solomon, being madly in love and lusting after this woman, did as she asked. He says that when he did this, the Spirit of God departed from him, and he immediately became weak and foolish in his words. God had taken all of the gifts he so long ago bestowed upon Solomon: his wisdom, his health, and his control over demons. The last few sentences in the Testament of Solomon are quite dark. He says that he has become the sport of idols and demons, and leaves the reader with a warning. I wrote out this testament that ye who get possession of it may pray, and attend to the last things and not the first, so that ye may find grace forever and ever. Amen. Earlier in the text it states that he's writing this on his deathbed. So this is Solomon's dying warning to whoever reads his testament, to not follow in his footsteps, to not allow yourself to be led astray from God, and to not worship foreign deities or meddle with demons. Interestingly enough, however, there is much debate over the authenticity of the Testament of Solomon. You see, while the text claims to be written by King Solomon himself, it's been dated to have been likely written between the end of the 1st century AD and the Middle Ages, around 1000 to 1300 AD, almost 2000 years after Solomon's reign. The real author mysteriously remains unknown. It was originally written in Greek and seems to combine a variety of different things from Christianity, Judaism, Greek mythology, and astrology, leading scholars to believe that it was likely written by a Christian with a Greek background. In fact, the demons mentioned in the Testament of Solomon for the most part have their origins elsewhere, most notably taken from Greek, Christian, Jewish, Egyptian, and Arabic traditions and stories. That's really the origin of most demons in occult demonology, to be honest with you. It's sort of a melting pot of different mythologies, cultures, and religions. They take pagan gods and deities from all over and recontextualize them as demons. The Testament of Solomon just being one of the earliest works to do this. That doesn't, however, discount it all as fake or made up, because for those with Christian or other Abrahamic beliefs, all deities outside of their one true God are believed to be demons anyways, which is where this all comes from. Now that we've discussed one of the more important demonic texts, and sort of established where occult demonology stems from, let's talk about all the other texts that came after. Firstly, most of the information regarding occult demonology can be found in what the occult community refers to as grimoires. Grimoires, as most of you probably know from fantasy movies and games, are essentially just spellbooks, guides and manuals for practicing magic. A lot of grimoires are not demonic in nature and just instruct the readers on performing simple, helpful spells, rituals, and divinations, or how to create magic talismans or charms. They contain recipes and ingredient lists and generally harmless things for people who practice Wicca or natural magic and other good-intentioned magic. The grimoires we are going to be talking about, however, and the only ones I am in possession of, are obviously not those ones. Demonic grimoires are guides that teach the reader about demons. They often provide information about specific demons, including their name, expertise, rank, how many legions they have under them, how to invoke or conjure them, and sometimes how they are to be treated or dealt with. Another thing these grimoires normally have are the demon's sigil or seal. Just as God has the pentagram seal in the Testament of Solomon, occult demonology has adopted the concept of each demon having its own unique seal. Within occult science, these sigils as well as a demon's name are instrumental in gaining control over a demon and protecting yourself from it. Let's explore some of these concepts by first taking a look at two of the most influential and famous grimoires in occult demonology: the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon. These two grimoires are based on the Testament of Solomon and are also attributed to King Solomon himself. Just like the Testament, however, scholars and historians have deemed this to be pretty unlikely. These works were likely compiled during the Renaissance period in the 14th to 16th centuries, as were many other grimoires attributed to King Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon was actually compiled in the 17th century, but it's worth noting that these works do contain information inspired by material much older than that. The origins of these ideas mostly scattered across time from multiple different cultures and traditions, much of it being influenced by the Jewish Kabbalah and the works of Muslim magicians. But regardless of their origins, the information they hold on magic and demons holds much authority within the occult world. The Key of Solomon, also known as the Greater Key of Solomon, dates back to the 14th to 15th century, and was likely the inspiration for the Lesser Key of Solomon that came later. In fact, the Key of Solomon is so influential that I would even venture to say that most grimoires dealing in demons and ceremonial magic are based on its teachings, with many occult writers throughout history using it as sort of a textbook during the creation of their own grimoires. Now, for the sake of not discounting anything outright and letting you make your own conclusions, I will tell you that within the introduction of the Key of Solomon, it reveals that the text was actually written for his son Rehoboam. The legend surrounding it is that he commanded his son to hide it in his sepulchre upon his death. Many years later, the book was then discovered by a group of Babylonian philosophers while repairing Solomon's tomb. No one could understand the writings until a man named Iohe Grevis decided to ask the Lord for understanding. The angel of the Lord appeared before him and made him promise that he would keep the text hidden from the unworthy and the wicked. After he promised to do so, he was able to read and understand the text. The story goes that Grevis put a spell on the book so that the unworthy, the unwise, or those who did not fear God would not attain the desired effect from any of the book's teachings. Whether you choose to believe that or not is up to you. It is possible that the oldest manuscripts we have on it are not even close to the original, and therefore the text itself may not be able to be accurately dated. But it should be noted that the information within is very much representative of Renaissance magic, and there are things within the text, such as references to Jesus Christ, that Solomon couldn't have possibly known. Unless, of course, you believe that the demons told him, in which case, yeah, I guess he wrote it. Anyways, you want to hear about summoning demons, I imagine. The Key of Solomon contains a lot of different magical rituals and experiments, most of which involve conjuring spirits or demons to achieve certain goals. Just in case demons are in fact real, or at the very least someone at YouTube thinks they are, I don't need this video to be seen as endangering content. So I'm advising against doing any of the things I'm about to talk about. Stay in school, don't summon demons. Before we dive into it though, I need to clear up a huge misconception when it comes to summoning demons. You see, most people, when they hear about summoning demons, they imagine some evil, satanic, human sacrifice, demon-worshipping ritual straight out of a horror movie, and most people who have only heard about but not actually read a Solomonic grimoire think that the material within more or less fits that picture. But, and I'm sorry to burst anyone's bubble here, things like that within occult magic and demonic summoning specifically are actually surprisingly rare. Much of it was exaggerated by the church and other fear-mongering writers during the European witch craze in the 14th to 17th centuries, and by Hollywood in more modern times. You'd actually be pretty hard-pressed to find a legitimate grimoire with anything like that in it. You see, Solomonic magic, which makes up the large majority of demonic conjuring methods out there, is almost always done by invoking the name of God and reciting many prayers and even confessing your sins. In fact, within the Key of Solomon's introduction, there is a message from Solomon to his son, in which he warns against using the knowledge within for evil purposes. For accursed be he who takes God's name in vain, and who will employ for evil purposes the knowledge and good wherewith he hath enriched us. Essentially saying, if you summon spirits in the name of God to be used for nefarious purposes, you will be cursed. The Key of Solomon stresses that before performing any of the conjurations within the text, one must fear God, adore God, honor God, and invoke his name for protection. You must also confess your sins and rid yourself of all evil. Not exactly the kind of thing you would imagine when thinking about summoning demons. That isn't to say, however, that darker rituals don't exist, and that there isn't a subsection of the occult that do participate in demon worship, and much more conventionally evil practices. That is what much of the occult community refers to as diabolic witchcraft, and we'll talk about that next. The difference between diabolic witchcraft and Solomonic magic can be simply defined by saying that Solomonic magic forces a demon to obey you through the power of God, just as Solomon does in the Testament of Solomon, while diabolic witchcraft is more so devoting yourself to the demon through black magic and worship. It is forcing the devil to give himself to you versus willingly giving yourself to the devil. However, that doesn't mean Solomonic magic is all sunshine and rainbows. Far from it. Just because you are invoking the name of God does not mean that there are not somewhat disturbing rituals and harmful or selfish spells within Solomonic grimoires, or that it isn't considered dangerous. Many occult writers warn against its use and caution the would-be conjurer to be very careful when dealing with demons in any way. Anyways, let's take a look at what Solomonic demon summoning looks like. Before you can actually begin a Solomonic demon summoning ritual, there are many things you need to attend to. As one might expect, summoning a demon is not a trivial task. First and foremost, one of the key elements in Solomonic magic is the observation of the planetary bodies and the hours and days that they govern. This is actually a pretty simple concept when broken down. You see, each day is governed by a different planet. Sunday, the sun; Monday, the moon; Tuesday, Mars; Wednesday, Mercury; Thursday, Jupiter; Friday, Venus; Saturday, Saturn. And on those days, the first hour is governed by that same planet as well. And then the second hour is governed by the next planet, and so on, in the order of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, and repeat. So Monday is the day of the moon, which means on Monday from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. is the hour of the moon. Then from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. would be the hour of Saturn, and so on. Whichever day it is just determines which planet starts the hourly rotation that day. Anyways, the Key of Solomon stresses that in order for a spell or conjuration to be successful, you must perform it during an hour that best suits the type of conjuration you intend on doing. For example, the hours of Mars are best for summoning the souls of those slain in battle from Hades. It says that while performing a ritual on the hour that best suits it is fine, performing it on both the hour and the day that suits it will always succeed better. So if you wanted to, say, summon a demon to help you bring destruction or death, that would be performed during a Saturn hour. You could do it on a Monday or moon day during a Saturn hour and get decent results, but if you do it on a Saturday or a Saturn day during a Saturn hour, it almost guarantees great success. Hopefully that all makes sense because we're moving on. So you've observed the days and hours of the planets and you're ready to summon a demon. Nope, not quite. The Key of Solomon details a 9-day preparation ritual you must undertake before performing any of the spells or conjurations in the book. I'll spare you the tedious details, but this ritual includes abstaining from vain and foolish conversation, frequently reciting prayers and confessions, bathing in consecrated or exorcised water, wearing white linen, and a few other rather uninteresting things. In most Solomonic grimoires, you'll see similar preparation rituals with some slight differences, but they often stress that if even one thing is omitted from the ritual or done incorrectly, the conjuring will be unsuccessful. Now, the next step after the preparations have been made would be to construct the magic circle as well as the metal pentacles. Yes, the one thing that Hollywood tends to get right is the use of some kind of ritual circle or symbols. They are probably the most important aspect of Solomonic magic. Now, there are very specific instructions for the creation of the circle that, for the sake of time, we just can't get into today. But let's take a look at what they would look like and the different purposes of each part. This is the ritual circle provided in the Key of Solomon. I, however, much prefer the one in the Lesser Key of Solomon, so let's take a look at that. So the idea here is that the summoner, or the master as the keys both refer to it, would stand in the center of the circle here. The circle, called the Magical Circle of King Solomon, is supposed to protect the summoner from the malice of the evil spirits. The demon that you are conjuring is supposed to then appear in this triangle here. This is the Magical Triangle of Solomon. But the ritual circle is not the only important symbol in Solomonic demon summoning. This is the hexagram of Solomon. It is supposed to be worn on your clothing and is said to compel the demon to be obedient and take on a human form when they appear. This is the pentagram of Solomon. It is supposed to be made of gold or silver and worn close to your chest. It is said to both protect you from the demons and give you command over them. This is the magic ring or disc of Solomon, also to be made of gold or silver. This is actually to be held up before your face to protect you from the sulfurous fumes and flaming breath of the demons. This might be a good moment to interject and add that the smell of sulfur in many occult beliefs is said to be associated with demons. For those of you who have never had the misfortune of smelling sulfur, it basically smells like really bad rotten eggs. This is what's known as the secret seal of Solomon, which the Lesser Key claims to be a seal that Solomon used to seal demons in a vessel of brass. I guess it's not so secret anymore. And of course, some of the most important symbols in occult demonology are the demon's sigil. This is what a typical demon sigil looks like. This is the sigil of the demon Malphus. Just like the pentagram of Solomon, the sigil of whatever demon you intend to conjure is supposed to be worn as a pendant or breastplate on your chest. In the lesser key of Solomon, it is stressed that if this is not done, the demon will not appear or obey you. Now, there are of course other symbols and pentacles and whatnot within Solomonic magic, such as the pentacles of the different planets. Within the Key of Solomon, each planet has a set of pentacles as well, all said to have different effects. But I think you get the point. There are a lot of symbols. So the basic rundown of how a Solomonic ritual would go would be first the preparation period, followed by the very specific creation of the circle and pentacles, and then the actual summoning can begin, in which some kind of conjuration would be spoken. These conjurations are provided within the grimoire and normally consist of some sort of plea to God, invoking his name and asking for wisdom and aid in the ritual, as well as for protection against the evil spirits. This is then followed by a passage aimed at the demon itself, commanding it to appear and obey you in the name of God. There are then steps laid out in case a demon is preoccupied in another place or just unwilling to come. These steps include a very long confession you must make, followed by another prayer, an address to the demon, and then a supposedly stronger conjuration also provided within the text. There's actually a few different conjurations within the Key of Solomon, each said to be more powerful than the last. I'd read one to you for an example, but they're like 2 pages long each and not very exciting. Anyways, if the conjurations summon the demon, you'll also need something to make it leave. In Solomonic magic, that is called a license to depart, which again is just another thing you are to read out loud, commanding the demon to go back where it came from. Now, that was a very simplified explanation, mind you. There are a lot of details that I didn't dive into for the sake of time. Solomonic magic is quite involved and exhausting. But before we move on to the more diabolical stuff, let's talk about the darker side of Solomonic demon summoning. You see, while most Solomonic rituals are pretty tame, there are other practices detailed in the Key of Solomon and other Solomonic grimoires that do lean a little more towards witchcraft. One such ritual involves the use of a needle to take the blood of a bat, pigeon, or other winged animal. Many occultists strongly advise against the use of blood in Solomonic magic, as it is more or less connected to black magic. There is also a section within the Key of Solomon that talks about some demons requiring some sort of sacrifice. It says that sometimes white animals are sacrificed to good spirits and black animals are sacrificed to evil spirits, and that they must be virgin animals. Sometimes it is an offering of blood and sometimes an offering of flesh. Note also, however, that there are other sacrifices that can be made to demons, such as just food and drink. But overall, the Key of Solomon strives to avoid these types of black magic rituals. However, the same cannot be said for some other Solomonic grimoires, such as the notorious Grimorium Verum. This is a grimoire that is somewhat frowned upon within the Solomonic magic community, because while using Solomonic teachings derived from the Testament and Key of Solomon, many of its rituals lean heavily towards black magic, with the use of blood and far more disturbing practices. The book instructs you to keep a lamen or pendant/symbol in your pocket written in your own blood, or that of a sea turtle. It tells you to offer fine incense and moisten it with your own blood, or that of a young male goat. It says to take the young goat and place it on a flat surface, such that the neck faces up, the easier to cut it. Take the knife and cut the neck in a single stroke, pronouncing the name of the spirit you want to invoke. And then you are to skin the body afterward while reciting an invocation. Keep in mind, however, that even in Solomonic rituals as seemingly dark as this, you are still invoking the name of God, reciting many prayers, and asking God to bless the ritual. Almost every tool used, for example, is exorcised in some way and then blessed by God before being used. Yes, this includes the knife that you use to cut the goat's head off in the name of a demon. More or less, you are performing these rituals from the side of God, despite chopping off a goat's head in the name of a demon. Yes, it's very strange and almost contradictory in nature as far as our mainstream beliefs go, and probably not what most people expect. Anyways, there are quite a few different black magic and weird practices within Grimorium Verum, such as writing in the blood of a white pigeon, burning the brain of a rooster along with dirt from a dead man's grave, the use of a human skull and even human fat, cutting a black hen in half, and so on. Again, much of this is frowned upon by followers of Solomonic teachings, as the use of blood and live sacrifices teeters dangerously on the edge of black magic and diabolic witchcraft, which we'll talk about in a minute. But before moving on, I suppose it would make sense to pose the question, why would someone summon a demon? Well, according to most Solomonic grimoires, each demon is capable of doing different things for the summoner. While there is talk of the expected things like bringing death and ruin to your enemies, most of the things demons are said to do are nothing like that. Let's for example take a look at some of the things the demon Astaroth can do for you according to the green butterfly ritual in Grimorium Verum. He will disclose all hidden treasures to you within a certain radius. He will introduce you to the person you will marry, and reveal what age you will marry. He will lead to your room any person that you wish. He will reveal hidden secrets of nature. He will bring you a sum of money sufficient for living the rest of your days. He will reveal remedies effective for all diseases. He will protect your house and fields from hurricanes, animals, and anything that may harm your interests. He will tell you who your enemies and friends are. He will transport you to any place you desire. He can render you invisible. He can render judges favorable to you so that nobody can speak badly of you. He can make you win at all sorts of games and renders you lucky in all. And funnily enough, it says that he can reveal winning lottery numbers to you a month prior. Most of these things, such as obtaining knowledge, love, and wealth, are common desires that demons are believed to be able to help you fulfill within Solomonic beliefs. There are a lot more oddly specific things, such as demons helping you to profit at gambling, to protect you against firearms, to reveal thieves, to make hail stop, make a carriage or cart stop, make a husband faithful, remain unharmed in a duel, not get tired on the road, extinguish a fire, and even to stop a dog from barking. So I guess if you're to take anything away from this section, it's that, first of all, unlike what you would see in a movie, demons are not typically summoned in a sort of evil, satanic worship type of way. And secondly, that they are usually not summoned for some sort of murderous, destructive purpose. In Solomonic rituals, demons are summoned in the name of God, usually for the purpose of gaining some sort of knowledge or material desire. If you would like to dive farther into the topic of demonic summoning and for me to go over a demonic summoning ritual in full detail, I'd be happy to do so in another video. Just let me know in the comments if that would be something you'd be interested in seeing as a part of this series. Alright, so as I mentioned, Solomonic magic is not the only way occultists have interacted with demons throughout history. There are practices out there that make Grimorium Verum seem like a children's book in comparison, though they are much more rare, and in some cases it's actually difficult to historically verify which of these practices actually occurred and which of them were exaggerated or made up entirely. It's important to note, however, that most of the time, diabolic witchcraft is not really summoning a demon, but more so worshipping and giving yourself to it in exchange for power. A witch involved in these practices does not have command over a demon like with Solomonic magic. Instead, it is more like the demon or Satan has command over them. They worship and follow the demon. It's very important to make note of the difference. There is nothing being done in the name of God here. Unlike Solomonic magic, in which there are many publicly available grimoires that teach you how to invoke demons, diabolic witchcraft doesn't really have that. Instead, a large portion of the information regarding these sorts of practices are found in books that teach about it as a means to root it out and destroy it. Books like the Demonology of King James I and the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, also known as the Hammer of Witchcraft. Writings like these were instrumental in the identification and prosecution of witches during the European witch craze, and easily far more evil than any book teaching you about summoning demons. Because, as a lot of you might already know, they were responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of likely innocent people, mostly women during the 14th to 17th centuries. The Hammer of Witchcraft is one of the most evil books to have ever been written. That being said, the things they describe involving witchcraft and demonic worship are more than likely made up, or exaggerations of pagan beliefs and rituals. But for the sake of being thorough, let's discuss some of the things these books say about witches in relation to demons and the devil. Slight trigger warning ahead, as some of the things we are about to discuss are pretty horrendous. It should be noted first that the era of witch trials and the fabrication of devil-worshipping witch lore stems mostly from the Christian church struggling to maintain its grasp on Europe. It is written out of desperation and fear towards other religions, free thinkers, and paganism, which is really where the original idea of witchcraft stems from. However, like I said, the Christian belief developed in such a way that pagan gods were seen as demons, and so any pagan rituals were demonic rituals in their eyes. The general belief at the time was that a witch would enter a pact with the devil and carry out his evil bidding on earth. In fact, in Malleus Maleficarum, it states that a devil cannot take form or cause any major damage without the assistance of an agent, or a witch. This rule also applied the other way, where a witch was incapable of doing anything without the assistance of a devil. So it would only be the two of them working together that could cause real harm. A witch has no magic without the devil, and the devil has no agent from which his evil can be spread without a witch. It was also believed that women were much more susceptible to the devil's influence, and so most accused witches were women, although there were men accused of witchcraft and executed as well, just far less often than women. There are three main methods said to be used by the devils and their witches to entice and allure innocent people into joining their ranks. The first was by inflicting losses of their temporal possessions. This is to say, taking things from them, killing their livestock, rotting their crops, or in some way making them lose something important to them in order to cause them to turn to witchcraft. In Malleus Maleficarum, it tells the story of a man who, through witchcraft, lost all of his horses. And so his wife, afflicted with weariness by the situation, consulted with witches for help. After that, all the man's future horses were protected from witchcraft, basically claiming his wife resorted to witchcraft to help her husband. It says that when witches were questioned about these dealings, they said that it requires a person to make a promise to a spirit, a promise to carry out the demon's instructions. Essentially, one would sell their soul, making a deal with the devil, so to speak, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. It is also said that witches would invite younger, innocent girls to their home for a feast or with some other promise, so that the devil, taking the form of a young man, could seduce and corrupt them. This was the second method. Actually, sexual intercourse with the devil or demons is a very common theme in diabolic witchcraft, with some stories claiming that women would willingly enter relationships with a devil. Some of these relationships are said to have lasted many years, sometimes described as being a very toxic relationship, but some described as an incredibly pleasurable experience. Either way, copulation with devils was said to be very common among witches. In some cases, this was said to be the way that a witch and a devil would sort of seal the pact they made. The third and reportedly most common method in which someone was seduced into witchcraft was through sadness. This would entail taking advantage of a woman's loneliness or disappointment in her love life. Malleus Maleficarum simply states that people would often turn to devils for aid and protection in times of great despair, either for the sake of vengeance by bewitching a former lover or the wives that they have married, or to give themselves up to lust and all sorts of sexual desires. There are also three types of witches noted in the Hammer of Witchcraft. Witches who injure but cannot cure, witches who can cure but cannot injure, and witches that can both injure and cure. It goes on to explain that there is one class of witch that stands out among all others. A witch capable of performing any type of witchcraft or spell, while the others only specialize in a single area. It says that they are capable of raising hailstorms, tempests, and bringing down lightning. They can cause sterility in men and animals, fly through the air both physically and spiritually, mentally affect and control others in numerous ways, create illusions, turn men into beasts, and of course even cause death and all other sorts of evils. But a witch is only capable of achieving this level of power through one means, and it is quite disturbing. This is where my earlier trigger warning comes in. I'm sure you've all heard the tale of Hansel and Gretel. Well, what does the witch intend to do with them? That's right. This most powerful class of witches are capable of performing feats that other witches cannot, because against every human instinct, they are in the habit of devouring the children of their own species. It says that the children that they do not devour are either killed or offered to devils. And it also says that these witches will dedicate their own children to devils, some even said to cook their firstborn son in an oven. But how exactly does a witch form a pact with a devil in the first place? Well, it states that while a pact can be made in private at any hour, there were also reportedly ceremonies or gatherings of witches that took place. These gatherings, sometimes referred to as a witch's Sabbath, would occur on a set day, usually at night in a private place, most often depicted in the woods or a field. And the devil would appear to the witches in the form of a man. He would then preach to them and make them promises of prosperity and length of life. And during these gatherings, the witches would sometimes bring recruits, who would swear to forsake the holy Christian religion. They then must give themselves to the devil, body and soul, forever, and do their utmost to bring others of both sexes into his power. The newly recruited witch is then instructed to make some sort of ointment or substance from the bones and limbs of children. The use of children within these diabolic practices only continues to get worse, with supposed documented confessions of witches who claim that they, through a spell, caused children to die in their sleep, making it seem as though it was a natural cause. And then they secretly take them from their graves and cook them in a cauldron until the flesh comes away from the bones to make a soup which may easily be drunk. Then, as I said, the more solid matter is used to make some sort of substance to be used in their witchcraft. It is actually said that this substance is how a witch is able to achieve flight, stating that they smear it on a chair or a broomstick and are then carried up into the air. It says that the liquids are then put into a flask or a skin, and when one drinks it, they acquire all the knowledge of witchcraft and understand all of the rites and ceremonies. Anyways, as far as the witch's Sabbath goes, the description I just gave is only the one provided in Malleus Maleficarum. There are a lot more colorful versions in other works, such as in another witch hunter's manual called Compendium Maleficarum, in which the Sabbath's participants would ride flying goats, trample on the cross, kiss the devil's behind, and dance naked in a circle. A 16th century text called the Antichrist detailed one of these Sabbaths, stating that an Italian man brought a woman to a field where he read from a black book, and then a large black horned goat with a black candle between his horns appeared, alongside two women and a man dressed as a priest. The goat asked the man who the girl was, and he replied that he brought her for him. He then requested that the man make the sign of the cross with his left hand, in mockery of making it with his right hand as he was made to do in Catholic Church. The goat then commanded all of them to come and greet him, which they did, kissing his rear. He then lit the candle on his head, and the others in attendance lit candles of their own. It then says, quote, "The goat took the woman aside, laid her in the woods, and carnally knew her, to which she took an extreme displeasure, suffered much pain, and felt his seed as cold as ice." It says these gatherings would take place every Wednesday and Friday, with more than 60 people in attendance. They would dance and share stories of the evil witchcraft they had done. Similar to the Witches' Sabbath, there is also a gathering known as a Black Mass, which is a mockery of the traditional Catholic Mass, in which everything is opposite. The altar would have an inverted cross and the chants would be said in reverse. These masses actually date back much earlier than the era of witch phobia. In the early days of Christianity, the church took note of heretical groups practicing their own versions of Mass. Some of these rituals described as being sexual in nature. For example, a Gnostic sect known as the Borborites were said to perform a perverted version of the Eucharist, which is the Holy Communion where Christians drink the blood and body of Christ in the form of bread and wine. The Borborites would instead use semen and menstrual blood as opposed to bread and wine. There is also the Eucharist of the Armenian Paulicians, who allegedly drank infant blood instead of wine. During the Basque witch hunts in the early 1600s, a description of a black mass, or a devil's mass as they call it, was given by the suspects, claiming that an altar would be set up with black and ugly altar clothes and an altarpiece with images and figures of the devil. At these masses, the witches would confess to the devil, but the sins they would confess would not be the evil that they had committed, but rather things like the times they had been to church, the masses they have heard, the good deeds they have done, and the evil deeds they had failed to do. Completely the opposite of a traditional confession. After confession, it was said that the devil would dress in ugly black vestments and begin Mass. His servants would all sing in low, out-of-tune, hoarse voices. The devil then preaches a sermon in which he tells them to not be overly vain in searching for a god other than the one they already have, for he is a good God, and although they must endure much hardship in this life, they will enjoy much rest in the next. The witches would then get on their knees and kiss the devil on his left hand, his chest, his shameful parts, and under the tail. After that, he gives them communion, which consists of an unknown, very bitter drink, which noticeably chills their hearts, and also an unknown edible substance described as a black shape with an image of the devil that is very sharp to swallow. While much of the information we have on black masses and witches' sabbaths stems from rumor, speculation, and suggestive interrogation through torture, and there really isn't much historical evidence of these ceremonies actually taking place, there is one group from the 13th century known as the Luciferians, whose devil-worshipping ceremonies are believed by some historians to have actually taken place. Although how much of it is exaggerated or completely fictional is not entirely agreed upon. You see, the belief of the Luciferians was that Lucifer and his angels were unfairly expelled from heaven, and that one day he would return to overthrow God and reign forever. Because of this belief, they did everything they could to offend God, believing that their reward would be everlasting paradise with Lucifer in heaven. Luciferian ceremonies included things like an initiation where a person would be made to kiss a toad, a duck, or a goose, sometimes on the mouth and sometimes in their more distasteful areas. It is also said that they would kiss a cold, pale man, and that when they did, they would lose their Christian faith. They were said to have held feasts in which a large black cat was present, believed to be possessed by a powerful demon or by Lucifer himself, the most worthy of them having the honor of kissing the cat's rear end. After this, a massive orgy would take place among the members, some of these members even being blood relatives. It is said that after this, a man with the lower body of a cat would appear from a dark corner and take a piece of the initiate's clothing, commending the group's leader for his service before disappearing. Now, as disturbing as the things we just discussed might be, keep in mind that a lot of it simply never happened. Modern research has found that there is no historical evidence of any groups of people, witches or otherwise, gathering and conspiring against the church and worshipping demons, except maybe the Luciferians. The rise of Satanism and other forms of devil worship is really a relatively new thing emerging from the 20th century. And even still, it is nothing like the material found in Malleus Maleficarum and similar texts. In fact, a lot of Satanists do not even believe that Satan exists. He is only used as a symbol, and the religion, rather than being based on actual demon worship, is more so about individualism and other ideological and philosophical beliefs. There is hardly anything evil about it. There are many different groups today that worship the devil or demons in some form and even hold black masses. But I assure you, it's hardly as depraved and horrendous as the things we just discussed. Obviously, they aren't eating children or doing anything illegal. Of course, there are rare occurrences of people doing horrific things in the name of Satan, as was the case with some serial killers, but those people are normally not mentally well and often very uneducated in their beliefs, where Satan is devolved into an edgy symbol to inflict fear. For the most part, though, there is really no evidence of any large groups of evil devil worshippers or diabolical witches ever existing. Which is rather disappointing if I'm being honest. I'm not claiming that there has never in history been someone who believed they were a witch in league with the devil. I'm sure there has been, but it was never a widespread issue with real gatherings and ceremonies, so if it did occur, we don't really have any concrete knowledge of their practices. Now, there is much else to be said when it comes to the topic of witchcraft. We've really only scratched the surface. But I think for now you get the picture, and we'll be exploring it much farther in other videos. For now, I'd like to move on to the final section of today's topic. A section that I saved for last because it is my personal favorite. So we've been talking about demons a lot today, but we haven't yet spent too much time regarding one of the most important parts of occult demonology. And that is to answer the question, who are these demons that we've been discussing? As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, occult demonology has developed immensely throughout the years. And part of those developments include the names, classifications, and hierarchies of demons. Unfortunately, as is the case with much of this field, there is no singular agreed upon classifications and hierarchy. Instead, there are multiple different occult works and grimoires that all provide different types and rankings. Let's start with the classifications, that is to say the types of demons. Not to be confused with a demon's rank, which is more of a military position or job title. We'll get back to that. To begin, let's head back into the infamous pages of Malleus Maleficarum. Within this text, it claims that there are many different types of devils, but only really provides two. The first are described as lesser devils who fell from the lower choir of angels, also called fauns or trolls. Fauns being taken from Roman mythology, a part goat, part human creature similar to the satyrs of Greek mythology, which are also often associated with demons. And then trolls being taken from Nordic or Scandinavian folklore. Whatever you want to call them, these lesser demons are said to be incapable of hurting anybody, at least not seriously. Instead, for the most part, they carry out only practical jokes. It says that they haunt certain places and roads and torment the people who pass through. The other type of demon mentioned is called an incubus, or the more familiar female version, succubus. And these demons are mentioned in many works of occult demonology. Incubi or succubi, quote, punish people in the night by defiling them with the sin of lechery. Basically, they have intercourse with human beings in order to corrupt them. Some of this copulation being entirely consensual, as with the diabolic witches, but sometimes this is a non-consensual act as well. The common belief within occult demonology is actually that a demon as a succubus would seduce and have intercourse with a man, obtaining the man's seed. That same demon would then transform into an incubus and have intercourse with a woman to plant the seed in her. In Malleus Maleficarum, it is theorized that the children born of this unholy act have the best sort of disposition for devil's work. Or rather, these children are more likely to become witches and sinners. That is, of course, if their mother isn't a witch who turned them into soup. Within King James I's demonology, it also added that succubi or incubi could take the sperm from a dead man's body, or even that they could possess the body of a dead man to perform their copulation with a woman. Now, speaking of King James I, in his text on demonology, he splits demons into 4 different types. Well, actually, he clarifies that they are not necessarily 4 different types, but rather 4 different methods that demons use to torment people. Essentially, any demon can do any one of these things, and they are more like personality types rather than separate entities. The first is called lemures, or spectra, and they are described as spirits that trouble houses or solitary places, taking horrible forms. He states that if they instead appear as a dead friend or relative, they are then called umbrae mortuorum, or wraiths. So they have like 4 different names. The word lemure here is actually also taken from Roman mythology. The lemure were spirits of the dead, usually those who did not get a proper burial, and so they roam the earth as vengeful spirits, although King James has adapted it to be a type of demon instead. The second are called obsession spirits, and they are said to follow certain people around to trouble them at various times throughout the day. The third are possession spirits, which is exactly what it sounds like. Demons that enter a person's body and possess them. Now, possession spirits and obsession spirits are actually described together because while their methods slightly differ, their reasons and remedies are the same. Both of these demons are permitted by God to torment those who are guilty of grievous offenses. It claims that they can weaken the body, afflicting people with incurable diseases. Their goal is to have their target mistrust and denounce God because of their torments. This idea is derived from the story of Job in the Bible, in which Satan torments Job for the same reasons. It should also be noted that an obsession type spirit is also the category that incubi and succubi fall into. And the fourth type of demon are known simply as fairies. These demons are said to prophesize future events and are actually connected to the previously mentioned act of diabolical witches taking flight. You see, in Malleus Maleficarum, it says that wicked women, perverted by Satan, ride in the nighttime on certain beasts with Diana, a goddess of the pagans. Diana being the goddess of the moon, hunting, wildlife, and childbirth, among other things, in Roman and Hellenistic religion. Her origins mostly lie in the Greek goddess Artemis. However, in medieval times, Christian authorities viewed her, as they do most pagan deities, as a demon. Anyways, in King James's demonology, it states that the fairy was also called Diana. The nature of these demons seems to be to aid witches. Now, as an alternative to this, sometimes demons, instead of being classified by what they do, are classified by the domain in which they reside. In the 11th century, philosopher, theologian, psychologist, and historian Michael Psellos wrote a text on demonology called De Operatione Daemonum, or On the Operation of Demons. Within his work, he separates demons into 6 classes. The first is Leliurium, which is a name meaning igneous, which means like lava rock and hardened magma, or it could just mean something that is of fire. This type of demon, despite its name, is said to haunt the air above us. The second is Aerial. Unlike the first class that haunts the air above, the aerial demons occupy the lower air that is in contact with us. The third is the earthly, or the demons that haunt the earth on the ground. Both the earthly and the aerial are said to deceive men's minds with a cunning and stealthy approach, compelling them to commit unlawful acts and pursue unnatural lusts. The fourth is the aqueous, or the marine, that dwell in water. These demons are said to suffocate in the water all that approach them. The fifth are the subterranean, that dwell underground. These demons are said to enter the lungs of those they meet and to seize and choke them, rendering them epileptic and insane. It is said that both the subterranean and aqueous are worse than the merely bad, implying that they are 2 of the worst types of demons to encounter. That is besides the 6th and final class, that is the lucifugus, or the heliophobic. It's not really explained where these demons dwell, but considering lucifugus means to avoid light, and heliophobia is the fear of sunlight and bright lights, I would assume this is meant to be demons that dwell in the dark. These demons are described as being barely sentient, but also that they are extremely malicious and mischievous, more so than the previous 5 classes. It says that they impair men's intellects by fantasies and illusions, and destroy them with the same enthusiasm as the most savage wild beast. They also share the trait of entering one's lungs to the same effect as the subterranean demons. In the 1460s, Alonso de Espina wrote a book that actually predates Malleus Maleficarum and is arguably just as evil, if not more so, due to its vast amounts of anti-Semitism. It was basically the foundation for the Spanish Inquisition. But in the final section, he provides his own classifications for demons. Unfortunately, I have scoured tirelessly for an English version of the text, but I was only able to find an untranslatable Latin scan. To this day, I've never been able to actually read it, so I can only relay to you the vague information I can find on the internet. Espina has a list of 10 different species of demons. The first are demons of fate, who have the power to alter destiny. The second are the incubi and succubi, which we've already discussed. The third are the cambions, which are the demonic offspring of a human and a demon. These are the children of the succubi and incubi created through the process I detailed earlier. Now, recall that in Malleus Maleficarum, it stated that the children born of this unholy copulation are just human beings with an inclination to sin, but in Espina's classification, they are actually demons. The fourth are rogue demons that attack the saints or the saintly. The fifth are demons who instigate witchcraft and try to induce old women to attend witches' sabbaths. The sixth are familiars. Now, I'm unsure exactly what Espina says about these ones, but in European folklore, familiars are spirits that would assist witches in their practice of magic. So I think we can probably equate familiars to King James's fairies. The seventh demonic species are ones that wander in large groups or armies. I suppose just hordes of demons. I was able to find information claiming that these demons bring about war, but I'm unsure if that is part of Espina's classification. The eighth are mischievous demons prone to telling lies. The ninth are druids or nightmares and are said to do just that, disturb one's sleep through bad dreams. Now, I can't really find a solid answer as to what the 10th species is. I did find one site claiming that it was disguised demons, but no other information was given. I would assume that just means demons that disguise themselves in various ways. But again, Alonso de Espina's classification is rather unknown to me, being that I have never been able to obtain an English edition of the text. But for the sake of being thorough, I felt like I had to at least give you the little I was able to dig up. If anyone watching this knows where I can read this text called Fortalitium Fidei, or the Fortress of Faith, please let me know. Now, in most cases, occult demonology doesn't label demon by type, but rather by rank or title, and there are multiple different hierarchies. This can get a bit complicated, as there is much variation between different works. To begin, let's head back to the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key is divided into 5 books, but we specifically want to focus on the first one, known as the Ars Goetia. Goetia is a Latin word that more or less translates to witchcraft, black magic, demonic sorcery, the invoking of evil spirits, necromancy, etc. Now, it is worth noting that the Ars Goetia is actually derived from a collection of other works on occult demonology, most notably Johann Weher's Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, Heptameron by Pierre Diabano, and the Renaissance grimoire known as the Magic Calendar. For the sake of this video, we'll just refer to the material as things from the Ars Goetia, just to keep it simple, and also because the occult community tends to do this as well. In the Ars Goetia, there is a list of 72 demons. Demons said to have been summoned by King Solomon, although many of the demons on the list are not mentioned in the Testament of Solomon. Now, because of this list, the Ars Goetia is probably the most influential grimoire to ever exist. Many of the most popular demons used in horror movies, games, and other fictional works are on this list. It contains the names, descriptions, and sigils of each demon, as well as instructions on invoking them and how to control them. Now, before we go ahead with the names, I should warn you that in many occult grimoires, most demons have multiple different names. This is simply because there have been many different translations throughout the years, resulting in many different versions of the names. Just so you know. So obviously I'm not going to provide descriptions for every single demon I'm about to mention, but I would like to provide an example of what types of things are said about the demons. So we'll take a look at Ars Goetia's 51st demon, Balaam. It says, the 51st spirit is Balaam, or Balaam. He is a terrible, great, and powerful king. He appears with 3 heads. The first is like that of a bull. The second is like that of a man. The third is like that of a ram. He has the tail of a serpent and flaming eyes. He rides upon a furious bear and carries a hawk upon his fist. He speaks with a hoarse voice, giving true answers of things past, present, and to come. He makes men go invisible and also to be witty. He governs 40 legions of spirits. His seal is this. So every demon in the Ars Goetia has a description like this. It details their rank, appearance, what exactly they do, and how many legions of demons they govern. Some have much longer descriptions than others, but I just chose a short one for the example. Now, you may have noticed that Balaam here was described as being a king, which is one of the 7 ranks that the 72 demons in the Ars Goetia are divided into. Before we get into that, however, let's talk about the demons that are above these 72. So on the top of all of them, we first have Lucifer. It doesn't actually state this within the Ars Goetia, but it's sort of implied whenever it mentions him. Below him, we have the 4 great kings ruling in the 4 quarters, or cardinal points. All 72 demons on the Ars Goetia are under their power. They are as follows: Amamen, the king of the east; Corson, the king of the west; Ziminair, the king of the north; and Goap, the king of the south. Now, in this video, I'm not going to get into the background of every single demon I mention, as there are just too many. Instead, for today, I'm just going to list them. So underneath those 4 great kings, we have the 72 chief spirits of the Ars Goetia. Alright, let's do this. First, we have the kings: Baal, Paimon, who you may be familiar with if you were unfortunate enough to see the movie Hereditary; Belith, Person, Asmodeus, Vinay, Balaam, Zagan, and of course, Belial. Underneath them, we have the dukes: Agarez, Valifor, Barbatos, Gussian, Elagos, Zepar, Bathim, Salos, Aim, Bune, Berith, Astaroth, Focalor, Vepar, Vual, Crocel, Alakez, Murmur, Gremory, Vapula, Harez, Amdusius, and Dantalion. Beneath them, we have the princes: Visago, Citri, Epos, Gaap, Stolas, Orobus, and Seir. Beneath them, we have the marquis: Samangina, Ammon, Luraj, Nabirius, Renove, Fornius, Marchosius, Phoenix, Sabnok, Shax, Aureus, Andrus, Andreophus, Simes, and Decarabia. Below them, we have the presidents: Marbus, Buer, Bautis, Marax, Glacia Labolis, Forus, Gaap, Malphus, Haagenti, Kame, Os, Ami, Zagan, and Valak, who you may recognize as the major antagonist in the Conjuring franchise. Below the presidents, we have the earls, or the counts: Bautis, Marax, Glacia Labolis, Renove, Furfur, Halphus, aka the Annabelle demon, Raum, Vinay, Bifrons, and Andromalius. And beneath them, we have one last rank known as the Knights, in which there is only one single demon named Furcus. Okay, that's done. I promise that is by far the largest list of demons we have today. You may have noticed that some of the demons were mentioned more than once under different ranks. That is because some of them hold more than one rank at a time. For example, Zagan is both a king and a president. It's also worth noting that no matter what the demon's rank is, they all have legions of demons under them, even all the way down to the knight Furcus, who has 20 legions of spirits under his command. Now, there are also other demons mentioned in the Ars Goetia that do not appear on the list of 72, such as the 2 kings known as Labal and Abalim, who are said to accompany King Paimon, yet despite being kings themselves, don't show up under the list of kings. There is also the demon known as Halahel, whose seal is given in a different section of the Lesser Key, and is said to be under the rule of the demon Baal. Interestingly, however, this demon is noted to be of mixed nature, meaning that it is partly good and partly evil. Now, speaking of mixed nature demons, while the Ars Goetia's list of evil spirits might be the most popular in the Lesser Key of Solomon, it actually isn't the only list of demons it has. There is another section known as the Ars Theurgia Goetia that people don't often talk about. Where Goetia is essentially a term for witchcraft and black magic, Theurgia is almost the opposite. It basically means high magic. So the title Theurgia Goetia is implying that the spirits mentioned within are both good and evil in nature. Within this, there are 31 demons of mixed nature, also known as the aerial spirits, and they are organized in a completely different way from the Ars Goetia. In terms of sort of the cosmology of Renaissance magic, these spirits occupy a position between the infernal realm and the celestial realm. That is to say, between the demons and the angels. That being said, it's sort of unclear whether or not these spirits are even demons, as the Lesser Key of Solomon doesn't really ever use the word demon, even in the Ars Goetia, only spirits. I've seen multiple different takes on this throughout the occult community, with some classifying them as a separate entity from demons and angels altogether, some believing them to be jinn. But most seem to believe that they are demons who are good and evil, as opposed to the entirely evil ones in the Ars Goetia. It is worth noting, however, that most of these 31 names end in IEL, which is common in the names of angels, not demons. With that in mind, I want to briefly go over their hierarchy, assuming that they are demons. So much like the Ars Goetia, this group of 31 demons is governed over by 4 emperors, and are each assigned one of the 4 directions, just like the 4 great kings. However, unlike the Ars Goetia, all 31 demons on the list are kings or princes themselves, and each of them has dukes and other spirits below them as servants. Now, I'm not going to go through and name every single one here for the sake of time, because not only does it list the 4 emperors and 31 kings, but it also lists a bunch of dukes that serve them, so there are actually like 500 plus demon spirits on this list. Let's just say this for today. The 4 emperors are Carnesiel of the east, Caspiel of the south, Amenadiel of the west, and Demoriel of the north. This compass shows the 31 demons with these 4 rulers in each of the 4 directions. Now, despite only listing like 8 to 24 dukes per demon, there are numbers given for how many servants these demons actually have, and the numbers are ridiculous. For example, Carnesiel has 1,000 great dukes, 100 lesser dukes, and also 50 trillion ministering spirits, which is a rank lower than the lesser duke. And that, believe it or not, is not even the highest number on the list. Amenadiel has over 40 quadrillion ministering spirits, Demoriel 70 quadrillion. So in summary, the hierarchy of aerial spirits is 4 emperors, under which are the 31 kings, under which are their servants that consist of dukes, lesser dukes, ministering spirits, and also sometimes just spirits in general. It's actually quite a bit more complicated than that, but it's not very interesting, so let's just save some time and move on. The final thing I'd like to mention in regards to the Lesser Key of Solomon is that after the Ars Goetia and the Ars Theurgia Goetia comes the Ars Paulina, which actually contains a list of angels. Obviously, that's not why we're here, so we're not going to talk about them, but I wanted to make note of it just to point out that the Lesser Key of Solomon has the evil spirit list, good and evil spirit list, and then the good spirit list, which is in a way another form of classification within the text. Anyways, let's take a look at some other hierarchies. In the early 1400s, an anonymous text was written called the Lantern of Light, and it provided a list of 7 demons known as the 7 deadly devils, or the 7 princes of hell. These 7 princes are based on the 7 deadly sins, and each demon is said to tempt people by means of one of the sins. The first is Lucifer, who is pride. The second is Beelzebub, who is envy. The third is Satan, who is wrath. The fourth is Abaddon, who is sloth. Fifth is Mammon, who is greed. Sixth is Belphegor, who is gluttony. And finally, 7th is Asmodeus, who is lust. Now, in 1589, a German theologian by the name of Peter Binsfeld wrote the Treatise on Confessions by Evildoers and Witches, in which he presented 7 princes of hell also based on the 7 deadly sins, similar to the Lantern of Light's list, but with some key differences. His list is as follows, and I will put it up next to the Lantern of Light's list so that you can pause the video and see the differences without me having to point it out. First, we again have Lucifer as pride. Second is Mammon as greed. Third is Asmodeus as lust. Fourth is Leviathan as envy. Fifth is Beelzebub as gluttony. Sixth is Satan as wrath. And 7th is Belphegor as sloth. Now, you may notice that in both of these lists, Satan, Lucifer, and Beelzebub are all listed as separate demons. This is an example of what I was talking about much earlier, where in many occult writings, these are not all the same demon, despite mainstream Christian belief. This is a topic I plan to explore heavily in another video though. The next hierarchy comes from the 3 books of occult philosophy by theologian, physician, legal scholar, and occult writer Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa in the early 1500s. His hierarchy is based on numeric scales and is as follows. The scale of unity, which contains the one prince of rebellion, of angels and darkness, Lucifer. Below that is the scale of 2, containing the 2 chiefs of the devils and the 2 things which Christ threatens to the damned, Behemoth and Leviathan. Behemoth and Leviathan are actually 2 biblical beasts. Behemoth, being mentioned in the book of Job, is said to be a primeval chaos monster created by God at the beginning of creation. Leviathan is a giant sea serpent mentioned in several books of the Hebrew Bible, including the book of Job, Psalms, and even the apocryphal book of Enoch. It is also said to be a primeval embodiment of chaos. In Jewish folklore and apocrypha, these 2 monsters are actually in a set of 3 primordial forces. Behemoth being the unconquerable land monster that lives in Duodain, an invisible desert east of the Garden of Eden. Leviathan being the sea monster dwelling in the abyss, and the seldom talked about Ziz, who is the primordial sky monster, described as a giant griffin-like bird with a wingspan large enough to block out the sun. Jewish legend describes a great battle that will take place between them at the end of time. Below them is the scale of 3, which has the 3 infernal furies, Alecto, Megara, and Tesiphone. These are actually ripped right out of Greek mythology, where they are referred to as the Erinyes and are goddesses of vengeance. The same scale then also has the 3 infernal judges, Minos, Achaicus, and Rhadamanthus, who are also taken from Greek mythology. They are 3 sons of Zeus who in death become the 3 judges of the dead in Hades. Below them we have the scale of 4, in which we have the 4 princes of devils in the elements, Samael of fire, Azrael of water, Azazel of air, and Mahazael of earth. You may recognize Samael and Azazel from my Christian demonology guide. Samael is a figure from Jewish lore who is more or less equivalent to Satan, and is the archangel who ends up coupling with the demon mother Lilith. And Azazel is one of the fallen watchers from the Book of Enoch, particularly the one that shares forbidden knowledge with mankind and is punished separately from the other watchers, and more harshly because of it. Azrael is the archangel of death in the Abrahamic religions. Mahazael, on the other hand, is a strange one because he doesn't seem to exist outside of occult literature. But anyways, these 4 entities actually have alternative names and titles within Agrippa's hierarchy as well. And instead of being the 4 princes of devils in the elements, they are the 4 princes of spirits upon the 4 angles of the world, which is similar to the 4 great kings mentioned in the Lesser Key of Solomon. However, the only demon that carries over is Amaymon, who is the prince of the south instead of the king of the east. We then have the Prince of the East, Orions, the Prince of the West, Paimon, and the Prince of the North, Aegon. Like I said, these are noted to be the same 4 entities as the first group with Samael, Azrael, Azazel, and Mahazael. And those 4 names are all angelic names, so it could be concluded that Amaymon, Orions, Paimon, and Aegon are their demonic names. Anyways, moving on to the next scale, which is the scale of 6. In this scale, we have the 6 devils who are the authors of all calamities. This includes Actius, Magalesius, Ormanus, Lycus, Nikon, and Mimon. Now, as far as demonology goes, we can skip over the 7th and 8th scales, as the 7th scale in the infernal category contains locations rather than demons, and the 8th scale doesn't even have an infernal category. The 9th scale, however, which may be the most important, has the final group of demons in Agrippa's hierarchy, and that is the 9 princes ruling over the 9 orders of devils. You see, Agrippa concluded that all demons were categorized into one of 9 degrees, or 9 orders, and at the helm of each order was a demon prince. These orders are said to oppose the 9 orders of angels. First, we have the order of false spirits, or false gods, whom the Bible strongly warns against. This would include the pagan gods and all other deities worshipped instead of the one true God of the Abrahamic religions. And this order is ruled over by Beelzebub, who in this particular work is claimed to be the same devil that tempted Jesus in the desert and is being equated to Lucifer as well, despite Lucifer also being in the scale of unity by his original name. Below them, the second order is the spirits of the lying, said to join themselves to the oracles and elude men by divinations and predictions. This order is ruled over by the demon Pytho, or Python, who is a serpent from Greek mythology. The third is the Order of the Vessels of Iniquity and Wrath. These are the inventors of evil things and all wicked arts, and they are ruled over by Belial. The fourth is the Order of the Avengers of Wickedness, and they are simply described as demons who cause judgment. This order is ruled over by Asmodeus. The fifth is the Order of the Deluders. These are demons that imitate miracles and serve wicked conjurers and witches and seduce people with their miracles, just as the serpent seduced Eve in the Garden of Eden. Their prince is quite obvious if you know that story. Yes, the one who in Revelation is said to have deceived the entire world. Satan. The sixth order is that of the aerial powers. These demons join themselves to thunder and lightning and corrupt the air, causing pestilences and other evils. The ruler of this order is a demon known as Merahem. The seventh order is the Furies. They are the powers of evil, discords, war, and devastations. Their prince is Abaddon, who, like I said earlier, was originally a word used in the Hebrew Bible referring to a place of destruction, not exactly a demon. The eighth order are the Accusers, or the Inquisitors, also called the Sisters or Triers. They are ruled over by Astaroth. The ninth and final order is the Tempters, or Ensnarers, and these are demons who do just that, tempt mankind to sin. It says that one of these demons are present with every man, making them comparable to the devil on your shoulder. They are ruled over by Mammon. The next hierarchy is a rather interesting one because it is said to have been provided by a demon. Introducing French Inquisitor Sebastian Michaelis. In 1610, he was involved in a case of demonic possession where a young nun was supposedly possessed by multiple demons, the principal occupant being none other than Beelzebub himself. As the case progressed, other nuns began claiming that they too were possessed, with one of them claiming to speak in the voice of a demon named Varin. Beelzebub, speaking through the nun, claimed there to be 6,660 demons involved in this particular possession. Now, Michaelis wrote about this case, and in his writing he detailed a hierarchy of demons that were named by the possessed nuns. This hierarchy is particularly interesting because it is entirely based on an angelic hierarchy written by Greek author Pseudo-Dionysius in the late 5th to early 6th century, modeled by the imperial court structure of the Roman Empire. Italian priest, theologian, and philosopher Thomas Aquinas then followed this hierarchy and divided the angels into 3 hierarchies, each with 3 orders, totaling 9 orders of angels, just like the 9 orders of devils we spoke about in Agrippa's hierarchy. Anyways, the demonic hierarchy of Sebastian Michaelis is structured in the same way. The idea is that these demons still hold the same rank after falling from heaven, just with opposite virtues, and that they directly oppose the hierarchy of angels that mirrors them. It also includes each demon's adversary in the form of a saint who they were unable to tempt with their particular form of temptation. This is a similar concept to the one found in the Testament of Solomon, in which every demon had an angel who frustrated them. So the hierarchy is as such. Hierarchy 1 contains the demons that used to be in the 3 angelic orders of the Seraphim, Cherubim, and Ophanim, or the Thrones, and it includes Beelzebub, the founder of the Hell's Order of the Fly, who tempts men through envy and is opposed by Saint Francis. Leviathan, who tempts people to give into heresy and is opposed by Saint Peter. Asmodeus, who tempts men into wantonness and is opposed by Saint John the Baptist. And Berith, who attempts men to commit homicide, be quarrelsome, contentious, and blasphemous, and is opposed by Saint Barnabas. These 4 are said to be the former cherubim princes, with the exception of Asmodeus, who was an Ophanim prince. And then we have Astaroth, who tempts men to be lazy, opposed by Saint Bartholomew. Varin, who tempts men with impatience, opposed by Saint Dominic. Gressel, who tempts men with impurity, opposed by Saint Bernard. And Soniolon tempts men to hate, opposed by Saint Stephen. And these 4 are former princes of thrones. The second hierarchy includes the angelic orders of powers, dominions, and virtues. Within this, we have Karu, tempting men with hardness of the heart and opposed by Saint Vincent. Carnivale, tempting men to obscenity and shamelessness, and opposed by John the Evangelist. Oelet, who tempts men to break the vow of poverty, opposed by Saint Martin. Rosier, who tempts men against sexual purity, opposed by Saint Basil. And Belias, who tempts men with arrogance and women to be vain and raise wanton children and gossip during Mass. He is opposed by Saint Francis de Paul. And the third hierarchy consists of the angelic orders of principalities, archangels, and angels. This includes Verrier, who tempts men against the vow of obedience and is opposed by Saint Bernard. Olivier, who tempts men with cruelty and mercilessness towards the poor, and is opposed by Saint Lawrence. And Louvart, who has no information besides him being a former Prince of Angels. Alright, I think as far as an overview goes, we may have overdone it. There are, of course, still plenty of more hierarchies to get into, but I think we can always get into them in future videos and in more depth as well. There are some that get pretty weird and even give demons oddly specific job titles. Like, for example, in the Infernal Dictionary, we have demons that are ambassadors of different countries. We have Nibus, who is the Grand Buffoon, and Asmodeus, who is listed as the Superintendent of Gambling Houses. And Nisroch, the Chief of the Kitchen. Then there are some that are a lot more simple, like the 4 crown princes of hell in the Satanic Bible. Satan, Lucifer, Belial, and Leviathan, which again are just sort of used symbolically and not so much literally. But that's enough hierarchy talk for one day. In fact, that's enough demonology for one day. This has been probably the longest video I've ever made and ever will make, and possibly the most in-depth look at occult demonology on YouTube. And even still, there are things we didn't talk about, like exorcism, Baphomet, and the Templars, and we've really only been dealing in Abrahamic demonology. Don't even get me started on the shit that they got going on in other countries, like Japan, for example. Let's just say that we have some fun ahead of us. That being said, I hope those of you who have stuck around for the whole thing have found this journey enlightening in some way, or at the very least entertaining. If you did enjoy, please let me know down in the comments below and leave a like to help me grow this channel. Additionally, if you are interested in learning more about demonology and all things spooky, be sure to hit the subscribe button, as now that we have the 2 major demonology guides out of the way, I can start diving into some more specific topics, and getting shorter videos out more frequently. I am very excited for the future of this channel, and I am very grateful to those of you who have already decided to join me on this journey. Anyways guys, I won't keep you. Try to avoid conjuring any demons or turning children into soup until next we meet. Good night.